And thank you for hitting record. And I'm going to be moderating this conversation today. Thank you so much for joining. I am very, very fortunate to be joined by two incredible guests. First is Britney Sickler, who currently leads EDA's new Networks division, which seeks to strengthen economic development strategies and create the conditions needed to share actionable insights across the economic development landscape. Prior to EDA, Brittany spent 9 years at the U.S. Small Business Administration, most recently in the Office of Investment and Innovation, where she managed several technology-based economic development programs in support of the Small Business Innovation Research and Technology Transfer, or STTR programs. Welcome, Brittany. I'm also excited to welcome Jesus Soriano, who is the Program Director of the NSF Partnership for Innovation Program. Previously, Jesus served as the SBIR STTR Program Director for Biomedical and Smart Health Technology since 2012, when he joined NSF after 20 years of leadership experience across the industry, nonprofit and academic sectors. Welcome, Jesus. For today, we're going to really have a fun, somewhat informal, facilitated conversation between Brittany, Jesus, and I, and then we're going to turn over to an open question and answer section. I think for us today, we're really trying to draw out lessons learned from Jesus' experience with the IPERF program, and then discuss how that relates to and looking forward to the Economic Recovery Corps. The Q&A session will start with kind of fielding questions from the chat, and then we'll go and allow y'all to raise your hands, and we'll kind of talk through Q&A. As we go through it, we'll put links to our Economic Recovery Corps program webpage and information to reach out to us as you have questions afterwards. But without further ado, let's get into our conversation. I want to start off with a question for both of y'all, so feel free to jump in as you see fit. We've gotten a lot of applicants to this funding opportunity. Have been asking us a lot of questions around the future partnership between the network operator and the EDA. And I'm just wondering for y'all, what lessons learned can you share about the benefits of a cooperative agreement for program flexibility?
Sure, I'll jump in, Sam, and just welcome everyone. Really excited that you are with us here today for the conversation. I am thrilled for the Economic Recovery Corps for a variety of reasons. I hope most, if not all of you, have had a chance to look at the Notice of Funding Opportunity and details around the program on the web page, including the FAQs. There's a lot of information around the program, yet at the same time, there are a lot of questions about what some of that guidance and what some of those prompts really mean. This kind of leads in, or to me is relevant to this question that Sam brought up in terms of the partnership and the cooperative agreement between what will be the awardee, the network operator, that group of organizations, and the EDA. And I think from our perspective, EDA is really looking forward to having a fruitful, supportive relationship between the network operator, who will be brought on due to their expertise, due to their experience and their ability to really make the program as effective and impactful as possible. However, EDA also wants to be able to bring the full force, the breadth of our relationships, our grantee experiences, and really make sure that the Economic Recovery Corps is tied in to the EDA mission and is accomplishing the lofty goals that it set out to do. So we imagine that we'll have a place, especially in the initial preparation phase, where we'll be working out and in collaboration the details around the fellowship plan, the placement plan, the host entity plan. And so while the award stipulations will be clear, we'll also have clear roles and serve in that supportive and capacity building side of things, while trying to help make the program extend in terms of its impact and reach. Jesus, I'd love to hear a bit, since we're looking forward into what's going to take place. I'd love to have your thoughts then looking back into some of the work that you've done.
Thank you, Brittany and Sam. for inviting me, and thank you to the whole EDA team for really developing what I believe is a visionary project, a new type of intervention that I think it is very much needed. And I really wish not only the EDA team, but whoever will be the grantee very much luck. I really mean it. A cooperative agreement is truly a partnership between the awardee institution and the agency. So, and there will be lots of lessons learned as both parties go together developing the program. I would say that, oh, by the way, I need to make a couple of disclaimers. I work for the National Science Foundation. I do not work for the EDA. Whatever I say is my own opinion. It's not the opinion of the National Science Foundation, and it should not be considered as, oh, Soriano said this, I have to put it in my proposal. That is very important. What I'm trying to do here is just share some of the experiences I've learned in my job at NSF, and particularly working and developing, implementing a partnership with an organization that allow us to bring a new type of minority. In our case, it was a minority fellowship for entrepreneurship. Those fellows were deployed in startup companies funded by the NSF. So going back to the question, flexibility, very important, the ability to learn as you implement. And I would say as well, for those of you who are preparing proposals, many of you have a model that you want to quote, unquote, sell or replicate. I think it's very important to look at the NOFO, read exactly what EDA is asking for, because I've consulted a little bit with the team, given some opinions, and then I read the result. It is very deliberate. They have a strategy, and if you're an applicant, you must really try to understand what they are trying to achieve. So it is very common for those of you who depend on grants from the government, or particularly from EDA, to say, okay, I'm going to sell my model. And I would encourage you to really stop and think, what are they asking? What do they need? How can I contribute to that impact that EDA wants to achieve?
Awesome. Thank you, Jesus. And that kind of gets into my second question for y'all. So curious around when you're putting together your application, you're moving forward with the Economic Recovery Corps, what design elements do you think are best surfaced in the proposal phase versus the post-award phase?
You want me to go? Okay. Again, all those disclaimers, right? I'm just a taxpayer giving my opinion here. There are many types of fellowships out there, that science making agencies like NIH and NSF fund, where somebody says, oh, I want to get a job. I'm going to get a fellowship. In this case, it's not a postdoctoral fellowship to go to such laboratory. It's an economic development fellowship to maybe stay in my own office. I don't think, from my public reading of the document that has been published, that's what EDA wants to do. I think EDA is trying to develop a new model where there is a really a new paradigm in capacity building, where an organization will create a new corps of people, professionals, right, who are going to be hired, trained, and embedded. And those are critical words that from my own reading as a taxpayer of this public document, I think it is in the benefit of all applicants to keep in mind. The network operator is the big honcho here, working obviously under the supervision and in partnership with EDA. But I don't think that this is a type of program where, hey, I'm calling you from such and such district. We need to hire this person. No, that person is not my cousin, but we need to give her a job or give him a job or give them a job. Can we apply for the fellowship? I don't think that is what we're trying or what they are trying to achieve. It's actually the other way around. If you look at the two keywords, I have the document written, the NOFO open, because I really love it, by the way. You deserve a lot of credit for writing this. It's very clear. I love the two things, right? Technical assistance, knowledge, and insights. When you think about what the impact would be, right, in those organizations at the national level, right, technical assistance, knowledge, and insights, it already speaks of the type of fellow that you want to hire and train. What type of expertise would that fellow have that would qualify him, her, or them for the fellowship? What additional expertise this fellow needs to receive in the beginning and throughout the process for the duration of that fellowship in order to be effective. I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I speak a lot, so I'll try to be brief.
Well, that's why we're here today, is to dig in. So I know that there's probably a lot more you could share too, but no, I think it's helpful for folks based off of your experience, running this award that's very similar in structure in terms of how NSF has funded a network operator to embed fellows. So it's great to have your eyes, and I promise folks here, I didn't plant any compliments from Jesus about our NOFO, but appreciate the support. I just wanted to add on real quick here, that there's some flexibility built in. I think those of you who have really scoured it can see that it is open to, the creativity, innovation from the applicant to come forward. EDA did not put strong guardrails around every component of what makes up the core. However, there are limits, but I think what's key here in the proposal phase versus should someone get to award is exactly what would get a proposal to an award. And that is, what are the competitive elements of how strong that vision and those plans are around some of the things that Jesus brought up. So in terms of the expertise of those fellows, the strategies of how they would be placed, the kind of big ideas of how can this investment be as impactful as possible. And so I just, if you caught our overview webinar, we had a few slides just giving some examples of places where folks could try to imagine a more modern fellowship program that hits on needs that aren't just at one place of an organization, a host entity, but also how we're looking across what the fellows are doing as a whole, and how the network operator is going to play a role in learning from the fellows' work and being able to surface those knowledge and insights as well to EDA and to entities that aren't host entities. So how can we provide benefit throughout the EDA structure, our regional offices, other federal agencies? How can we also provide those insights to our partners and communities around the country?
Thank you. I want to move a little bit over to specifically the fellowship and some of the lessons learned from the fellowship program. And so, Jesus, I have some questions for you, if that's right, and Brittany, definitely jump in as you have follow-ups. So I know that, even though the NSF program has different goals than the Economic Recovery Corps, be curious what fellow compensation and benefits considerations could applicants take into account when they're putting together their proposals?
So as Brittany said, this is an opportunity for the applicants to come up with entirely new models, right? Things that could work and have not been even thought by the EDA. So do not hesitate to innovate. But I mean, we live in a tough economy, right? Inflation, etc. So the first thing that would come to my mind is what type of compensation package you are preparing for the fellow or fellows, in terms of why would this person take the fellowship, just not out of love for public service. What type of fringes, health insurance, relocation, training, professional development. It sounds naive for me to say this, but this is the difference between you attracting fellows that can be deployed to one or more locations and make a difference. So that would be a big part of the design element. There are many others, but I guess I'll leave it there for now. Or maybe I could add one more thing.
Go for it.
As you design the fellowship, think about the relationship between the fellow and the host institution. In my opinion, but again, you are free to submit whatever proposal you think would work. In my very limited opinion, the host should not be the employee of the fellow, particularly because you want a fellow who has some degree of expertise. From the moment that the host takes a relationship of power over the host, you, network operator, may not have the leverage or authority that you need to run the program effectively. So clarifying the agency relationships between the network operator EPA, network operator fellow host organization. What are the rights and responsibilities? What are things that should be done and not done? What happens in times of crisis, harassment, misbehavior by any party? Things that always think for the worst and prepare for the best. That would be my advice. So a set of policies and procedures that are clear and agreed upon, it is very important.
That's helpful. And that actually gets into my next question. So would love if you just expand a little bit more on how you mitigated risks, particularly around fellow recruitment and then also fellow attrition. Like, how did you think about the risks that came up in the program and how to mitigate them?
The fellowship, the IPER fellowship is, I mean, you can find it on the NSF award database. It's a public database. It's a long-term partnership that NSF has with the American Society for Engineering Education, right? So as partners, we have learned together and developed policies together. I would say at the end of the day, the buck ends with the NSF program officer. That's how I see it from a fiduciary perspective. Although both parties are responsible. I think everything starts with a matching program. Identifying, and maybe, I mean, this is my own experience, maybe it's not what EPA or the network operator determines is the most effective, but on the one side, build a pool of fellows. Because you start with a specific criteria, a fellow should meet these requirements, minimum requirements, and then a fellow will be also trained these additional skills, because a workforce development component for the fellow would be always good. So what happens about once the fellow ends that work, right? So there you have one pool, which is the fellow, and what mechanisms are developed to identify and retain those fellows. And then there are the applying institutions, right? What type of needs they have that will be best addressed through the deployment of a fellow in their other institution. And by the way, because we are in COVID time or post-COVID, would that be hybrid or in person or etc. Right? So all those considerations need to be taken into account. So you build two pools together. One is the applicants, institutional applicants. The other would be the fellows. And then what process of matching is there, right? How would you put that together? Again, these are my opinions. This is not EDA giving you advice on how to build a fellowship.
Brittany from EDA, do you want to jump in with anything?
Sure. No, I think, and Jesus, I appreciate the disclaimers too, especially as folks are coming in and out. I think what has been particularly helpful for us, and I know some others too, is just hearing of your experience and being able to relate it to the program. So for those who are just joining, Jesus is speaking from an NSF program, but with his own opinions and kind of thoughts and reflections on things that have gone well. And our goal here today is to really be able to provide a little bit more inside information around what are some of these key points and approaches to putting together an economic recovery core program. So,
thank you. I mean, one institution of higher education could decide to do, okay, all our graduates from class of 23 with a master's or a bachelor's or something will be fellows. I mean, they have the right to submit that type of proposal, and EDA would evaluate it. So again, very important. I'm just giving my opinion in terms of things that I have observed, but you should not copy what I'm saying and put it into a proposal, because that could be maybe your defeat and failure.
Correct. Thank you, Jesus. I'll just make another comment here too, in terms of the fellows. Again, there's not a strict stipulation that's found in the NOFO. However, I think we would want applicants to consider impacts of their plan. And so, when you look at the evaluation criteria, there's a lot of language on, kind of not only having a plan, but the depth and recognizing again some of those risks and challenges. So a challenge to having more fellows that have less experience would show up in a way versus having fellows that are already coming in with the experience needed to get moving faster or working on more complex projects. So there's a difference there, and to recognize that is same as any other kind of program folks are applying to, where you really do need to stipulate the rationale behind and defend that approach, and provide information that allows the reviewers then to look at that and be able to compare and have an idea of what would take place should that kind of plan come to fruition. So again, that ties into the compensation, that ties into relationships with those host entities as well.
Awesome. All right, I have one more quick question for you, Jesus, around the fellowship side of things and the lessons learned. So how did you track the feedback you got from the fellows? What was that process like for y'all? And then what kinds of adjustments, if any, did you end up making as the program progressed?
I cannot divulge specifics, but let me try to answer in general terms. I believe whoever manages a fellowship program needs to develop evaluation system, and that goes together with policies and procedures that allows the operator to gather information, monitor the status of not only the classic grant making reporting issues, but really how the human capital is being developed and deployed, right? And being able then to report to EDA promptly. I think it's important for particularly in a situation where a fellow is deployed in a place where maybe this person is totally new, and there are also cultural differences, or there's upheaval or any situation. Very important to create a mechanism where the operator is knowledgeable, knows how things are going, is able to gather information, report to EDA, and also develop a set of preventive and corrective actions. That is very important, in my taxpayer opinion.
Thank you. All right, so last set of questions before we go to opening it up for the Q&A. There's, with the IPERF program, you had to balance kind of the costs of running the network with actually paying the fellows. So curious how you sought that balance. And for folks who are potentially applying to be network operator applicants for the Economic Recovery Corps, are there any lessons learned for them that you suggest they consider?
I mean, my advice would be general. I would be both to EDA and the applicants and that's where, as a NSF program officer, where I tell my own reviewers, always look at the budget, because the ability to plan and execute is informed by the clarity of the budget, right? So the less esoteric a proposal is, the better. the better you prepare your applicants, provide to EDA a clear picture of how the operation would be and how it would be financed, where the dollars go and don't go, that would be critical. In the type of NSF grant supporting the hyper program, basically you have a set amount of money, and based on that you do certain things. Obviously, that program has been around already for a long time, so we know it. But I think the most important, I would say, is, again, from my own private taxpayer opinion, provide a very clear picture in your proposal to DA of what this is about, where the money is going, what is the cost structure. That would be, if you go granular, obviously following ADA policies, I think it will make you think about or visualize how this fellowship would work in any single day. Imagine the fellowship on day 30 after award. What's happening that day? Who is doing what, right? How much money is moving hands? That's how I would approach it.
Well, before we jump to questions, Brittany, I want to make sure you have a chance to drop in any final points here.
Thanks, Sam. I was just about to make a quick recognition of the budget. In case folks haven't seen our FAQs or caught the other webinar, when you do look at the NOFO, there is a range that's put for this program. And so our guidance has been to the budgets that are on the lower end it's going to be more likely, but then we're going to have the final budget amount later this month. And so just having that understanding that there could be changes or flexibility in that final budget number. So I just wanted to recognize the challenge, and I'll put the FAQs in here as well, but you have our standard language in the FAQs around how to navigate that budget range that we have currently.
All right, so we're gonna transition over to the Q&A session. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we're gonna start with some questions from the chat. So I don't know, Brittany, if you've seen any that you wanna go after and address. And once we make it through the chat questions, we're gonna go to a live Q&A. To get yourself ready, if you wanna ask your question live, you'll see at the bottom of the Zoom screen, there's a reactions button. You're gonna wanna click that button, and then you're gonna wanna click raise hand, and we're just gonna go in order of the hands we see raised. And so when we call on you, just come off mute and ask your question. So we'll do this for about the next 20 minutes, and then we'll seek to wrap up. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, go for it if there's a question you see you want to address.
I see some good questions in the chat, some that I think we'll be able to cover here, some that might be a little bit more complicated. But I just wanted to make another announcement in case folks have specific questions, you know, for Jesus's experience. If you want to dig into a little bit more of what happened with IPER, feel free to phrase things or let us know if you're interested on that side. And then Jesus, also feel free to chime in if some of these questions you have other thoughts based on your experience. Don't hold back. I'm going to start with one I see from Amanda on the capacity building side. So the question is if the focus should be entirely on the fellows development, or should there be some built-in capacity building evaluation for the organizations that are hosting the fellows? So excellent question. And I think that's also one of those areas where a network operator would have the leeway to put forward a variety of options. I think that inherent in having a good experience for the host entity and fellow, there would be support around those hosts. Now, to what extent there would be training and additional resources or other kinds of interactions with those host entities, that would be up to the network operator to propose now at this time, and would be defined in that preparation phase with EDA. But I think it is definitely important to, again, remember that this economic recovery core is not just about the fellows. It's also about the host entities where they're doing that work. How will that translate? How will that be, accepted and embedded, that the work and the fruits of that work in the region, across regions, throughout the state and state or territory, and then also as fellows are able to impact each other. So great question, and not a very specific answer, but it's one I definitely encourage applicants to be considering.
If I may add, I would say if we are talking about the concept of accountability from all parties, accountability of the fellow who received the fellowship, the host institution, and the network itself. The other component is you are building, this is an historical opportunity, you're building a new model, right? So what lessons, how can you, what type of mechanism would you develop or system to learn lessons quickly so they can be reported to EDA and together implemented? I mean, if any correction is implemented. Good government interventions should last for a long time, so long they remain effective. I know that, for instance, NSF has this thing for creating programs like ICOR or the SBIR many years ago, right? And then Congress takes notice of that. So it is an opportunity for everybody to excel. So develop mechanisms that will allow you to nurture this program and don't let it fail.
Thanks, Jesus. I'll just jump in if that's okay, Sam. I see one that's asking about comparisons, the Economic Recovery Corps, I wonder if the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. I'll make just two kind of area statements. One is that the Economic Recovery Corps is, the model is obviously built off of many successful and interesting models that currently or have existed in the past. Some related directly to EDA and some of the work that's been funded through the disaster recovery coordinators. There's been AmeriCorps Vistas that have been closely tied with EDA, the economic development districts, EDDs. And so there's been a lot of lessons learned. And so we tried to tie in as many of those into this program. Sometimes extending some of that work and sometimes complementing or continuing that. So depending on your experience with any of those, you may see some veins in there. But there's also other federal agencies with a variety of fellows programs. And I think that's been one of our challenges is just making sure folks understand some of the basics. And some of those questions revolve around the fact that these will not be federal employees. This is not just a talent pipeline that we're trying to get in either to federal government. This has various components. And so again, going back to that NOFO to make sure all of you understand all of the different pieces that are coming together to form the ERC. Let's see here. If folks have more questions in the chat, now's the time to throw them in. I just will make a comment that I've answered a few in here, some more technical ones on eligibility. Also wanted to note if you have more personal questions, or I shouldn't say personal, but more individual specific questions, you can reach out to our email. I believe Sam mentioned that earlier as well, in case you didn't want to bring it up here.
It looks like Laura had a question. Were you able to get to that one, Laura Ferry?
Thank you, Sam. For this NOFO, asking if it's required that fellows go through or be funded by an EDO, or can the network operator simply partner to facilitate impact and opportunities? Laura, I might need a little bit more detail around some of the question, just to make sure I understand. Each fellow would have a place where they're situated. Each would have a host entity. Now, whether that entity is one organization or maybe an entity represents a wider area, that's one element that we had brought up in the overview webinar. So it's possible that a certain number or percentage of fellows could be with a local EDO, economic development organization, or they could work across several. Again, there would be strategy behind why there would be a split and how that impact could extend. But the network operator, there's definitely an opportunity as well to partner with other entities to make the fellows work extend even farther. So you'll see some language in the NOFO and the evaluation criteria as well. A match funding isn't required, but there was even some mention of any kind of additional funding that could extend the work, looking into sustainability. You can look at partnering of how could that impact and be a positive benefit to the fellows and the host entities. So there's a few elements, I think a few areas where that question could lead, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more food for thought.
I saw Melody has a question in chat, and then maybe we go over to the folks who have their hands raised.
All right, so Melody's asking about traditional measurement methods. Are they considered innovative enough? So there's not an evaluation criterion how innovative. I think whatever is being proposed, if you're talking about evaluation of the fellows work, evaluation of the network, I think we're going to want to see proposed metrics that align and a methodology that makes sense. And so I think we might need to talk a little bit offline to get to some of your question or concern there. But again, making sure that any kind of measurement and looking at the data that surfaces is fully matching up with the kinds of work that the fellows would be doing, that you're proposing, and the kinds of places they would be in.
Awesome. Okay, so I know a few folks have joined as we've been in Q&A. So just to kind of recap where we are, we've been going through the questions in the chat. Now we're going to turn it over to folks with their hands raised. So if you don't know how to raise your hand on Zoom, you're going to click the reactions button at the bottom and then click the raise hand button and then just get in line, and we're just going to go through for the next 10 to 12 minutes on Q&A. So yeah, I see Robert Shields is first up. Robert, would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Robert Shields. I'm checking in from the unsucceeded Dene lands in Fairbanks, Alaska. So thanks for having us. And my question goes to developing partnerships. I mean, you guys have made this a very competitive grant, stating that you only want to select one national operator. And I'd like to know if you have any plans or opportunities for us to be able to collaborate, like even with just the other people on the call. We have a nonprofit. We think we have a plan that you guys might like. The one thing we don't particularly have experience in is managing a $25 million EDA grant. So we're looking for potential partners who can help us expand on this and grow our capacity. But we're not sure how to connect with people. We're 3,000 miles away from you guys. So that's the question is the EDA going to be facilitating any collaborative partnerships? Is that a possibility, or are we just on our own to develop those relationships? Thank you.
Thanks, Robert, for being here today and for the question. I will admit one of our challenges was here in this program is the short timeline in the application phase for such a large program. So we do recognize that as a challenge. We also have our own challenges in terms of getting folks together or being able to matchmake. And I will say that's in part why we wanted to host today's session, where it could be a little bit more interactive, whether in the chat or in your private chat. So unfortunately, we're not able to put together organizations. We don't want to endorse a specific arrangement of entities coming together. But for folks that really want to make sure that it gets out, that they are interested, we might have some ways for you to do that. So one is here, and then we can also follow up separately with you too, Robert.
Great. Stacy's been patiently waiting with their hands up. So Stacy, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Great. Well, thank you so much for hosting this. Nice to see you. It's not nearly as early here in Newark, New Jersey as it is in Alaska. But I had a question related to the duration of the fellowship. I think some of the guidance in the last call was having sort of one fellow serve for the 3 or 4 year term, and that might seem a little long. I was wondering if maybe there could be some advice from Jesus on term length and thinking of different ways to kind of look at making sure there's some sustainability at the site if there is turnover, and looking at positive attrition in terms of employment and job creation in those spaces.
Stacey, thank you. Obviously, my advice is not EDA's advice. I can just, and maybe what I'm about to share may not be what EDA needs or wants, but I'll just share it and then use that information as you see fit. particularly because you are starting a program from scratch. I would advise against adopting dogmatic positions and always building flexibility. The fellowships are a type of relationship where the human component is critical. The relationship between and communications between the fellow and the operator, the fellow and the host, and the fellows among themselves, right, as a community of practice is critical. To which extent, I mean, the applicants, in my advice, should reflect on to which extent a fellowship should last X months or years, what are the advantages or disadvantages, and what happens if things do not work, right? Sometimes a fellow or a host organization could be an amazing host, but there's not much between those two parties. So what type of mechanisms would be put in place to identify potential risk and to address issues, right? I'm trying to be very general.
No, that makes perfect sense. So we run an AmeriCorps program at LISC, and so we encounter some of those challenges along the way. So I was just looking for some advice, and that was very, very good. So thank you.
Great.
Just make
yeah, go ahead.
If I can pop in quick, Sam, I'll make a quick bond to that too for Stacy, and that, you know, we're trying to signal through that the longer suggestion of time, the ability to actually, you know, accomplish more of whether it's those potential activities or others that align, and the opportunity we have through this program to have longer fellowship versus some of the other programs that we've been involved in and run where we're limited by time. So again, there are risks of folks leaving. There are, you know, risks of that kind of being able to commit for that long. And so that's why we do have that section as well of like thinking through what else is possible. If there is an ideal, if there is, you know, the direction you want to go in, but then what else would be in place, you know, should things change, or should your strategy have, you know, a little bit of a different approach. So.
I see that Laura has asked 2 questions in the chat. Laura, I don't know if you're able to come on, but it might be helpful if you just want to come off mute and ask those questions so Brittany and or Jesus can respond to them.
She's coming on. I will see the second one I'll look at first here. There's a question if a network operator can be a host institution, even if it's not an EDO like a university. Well, one, I will say, you know, economic development organizations encompass a wide variety of types. And so you could definitely consider a university. Not all universities might consider themselves EDOs, but they're not expressly not an EDO. So we wanted to clarify that. And also the responsibility of the network operator here is very different than the host entity. So this host institution. So I would just pay careful attention to that. So there could be overlap in the kinds of entities that could be a network or part of that network operator coalition, especially if it's a larger group of organizations. But what's happening at a host entity is different than the work at the network operator. So just making sure that you're not kind of mixing up what's possible and that we're just funding fellows to help a network operator fund fellows in a circular pattern. So so if you have more specific questions, I think that might be one that might be a little bit more tailored to where you are, unless you'd like to.
No, thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. Thank you.
See one more question in the chat from Kay. It says, will grantees need a resolution to accept the EDA grant, or can that process happen once awarded?
So I might have to check more specifics on what you're asking for in that resolution question. But I might step back for the larger group here, making sure that the network operator, the organizations involved in that network operator applicant pool all fit the eligibility criteria. And so making sure not just for eligibility, but also in the applicant capacity and expertise. So making sure that in the moment of application that you are able to engage with the federal government in award of this size and type. We do have a technical review process where we go through that before any of the proposals make it to a merit review where the actual program is.
If I can clarify my question, this is Kay.
Sure.
So most government entities, when their governing bodies may want to approve the award, and sometimes, you know, when you write out grants, the grant will say that you have to have a resolution to accept the award. So that's basically the question before even being awarded. And so some grants don't request you to have a resolution to accept the award prior to. They'll, you know, maybe ask for that afterwards. So I just wanted clarification on that.
We might need to put that in FAQs for me to be able to answer securely,
Okay.
but to my knowledge, if there is a process like that at EDA, it's not quite described like that. So
Okay.
May I just ask, out of curiosity, are you okay at referring to the actual award that EDA would give to the operator, or to the fellowships that would be given to the fellows, or the
I was
placement of a
talking
fellow?
about the actual award that they would give to the operator.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are almost at time. I'm not seeing any further questions. So I guess for both Brittany and Jesus, kind of parting words, parting advice as folks head into this last essentially month before the application is due.
So there's a lot of advice I probably have, but it really does center in these last 4 weeks that this opportunity is open is hopefully those of you who are interested are able to put together the partners and the ideas to really bring forward a transformative economic recovery core. Again, in alignment with EDA's mission, in support of our grantees, communities, those areas around the country that have really been hit, not just through the last several years, but even beyond. And so how can we really take this program and be able to have some short-term impact and long-term impact? So, you know, my advice is if you're able to consider now, if you're not, maybe after this, we've either provide information where you wouldn't be part of the network operator. Again, wanting to emphasize that there will be other areas or other times where organizations could come in to either apply to be a host entity, to keep in the loop on what's going on, maybe to follow what the fellows are doing and learn from some of the outcomes that are shared. Again, we want to engage a much larger community. This is just one award and it will be competitive. So I encourage very strong proposals and I know it'll be a hard process for us, but I do want to caution folks from jumping in before really taking a deeper dive into what they're able to do, what they're able to put together as a proposal. And then please reach out with questions to our networks at eda.gov email address as well. So the sooner the better, as well as I know people won't be able to submit weeks in advance, but also those who do submit, we always say, please don't submit the last hour, especially if you've been putting together a very large proposal. We would hate to see any of those kind of system issues get in the way. So, Jesus?
Again, my own opinion, I've been working for a decade at the National Access Foundation, where we are always funding new things. We are not an agency that keeps things running. Our job is to create new things. So I come always from this opinion that this is a great opportunity to come out with a new paradigm, something that obviously later should be made sustainable. I'm not saying it's the responsibility of the government to make it sustainable. Maybe it's the responsibility of the operator or and the partners. That's not for me to say at this time, but I think I love proposals in my own work at NSF that are both visionary, but that demonstrate the ability to execute. It's just not about coming with a great idea. It's demonstrating that you will be a good fiduciary partner using the taxpayer dollars effectively by translating those great ideas into something that can make an impact in the territories, districts, local jurisdictions that will be receiving a fellow, in the fellows themselves, and in your own organization. How, to which extent can this award be transformative to you? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Brittany, for making your lunch hour and this lovely fireside conversation. Want to thank everyone who's joined us for your thoughtful questions and for your engagement throughout this conversation. We're going to take this recording and hopefully we'll have it up within 3 business days on the program webpage for the Economic Recovery course. So if you missed any part of it, I know some folks were jumping in and out, you can catch it there. I want to kind of give you a sense of where we're going from here. So as I referenced a little bit earlier, we have less than a month before the application deadline. It's due on August 5th. Kind of per Brittany's point, just at the end here, prospective applicants really must address all of the eligibility and expertise requirements in order to apply. So just make sure that you have that down before applying. And then again, to reiterate and underscore Brittany's points, please reach out to us if you have questions, if you're considering applying, and the best way to reach us is that networks@eda.gov address. I can assure you that we are looking at it all of the time, so you will be able to reach us. And yeah, that's kind of where we are. And just again, thank you so much for joining and for this conversation today.